Hi, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. My name's AJ. I'm on the webinar team here at AppDynamics, and today we're here to talk about the highly anticipated marriage of AppDynamics and Cisco Intersight, and what this new approach to application infrastructure management means for your business headed into the new year. I'm sure we're all looking forward to more positive changes to the way we work after last year, so I hope you're excited for this discussion. But before I turn it over to our speakers today, I'm obligated to share this safe harbor statement, and I'll quickly call out a few other housekeeping items. So firstly, note that the console you're looking at is completely customizable, so feel free to explore the widgets in that bar at the bottom of the screen. If any of the windows you see in front of you are unclear or too small, you can move or resize them by dragging the corners of the window. And if you have any other video or audio issues, try to refresh your browser. That usually works. You can close any unnecessary browser tabs to help conserve your bandwidth. But if you're still experiencing any issues, do reach out to us through the Q&A widget, and we'll try to help you out. And this session will be available to watch on demand later. But for those of you watching this live, if you have any other questions for us, feel free to drop those in the Q&A widget at any time during the webinar as well. We do have AppD and Cisco product experts on hand to answer your questions as soon as they come in. All right, without further ado, I'll kick it over to our host today, Eugene Kim, and we'll dive right in.
Thanks, AJ. So before we get started today, I wanted to take a look back at the last year and really the rapid digital transformation we've seen across our industries. We've truly seen a new world of experiences as consumers and across our firms. We've seen contactless pizza delivery happening, biometric airline ticketing, virtual fan experiences. I recently attended an avatar-based virtual conference, which was actually kind of fun. And now shopping has become this plexiglass cage of cashless experiences. And from the consumer standpoint, these have seemed very seamless and given us a new way of operating our businesses. But we know that from the application and the IT team standpoint, it's taken a massive digital transformation in order to deliver these new experiences. And today, I'm very excited to talk about some new innovations that we have to help you manage your application infrastructure in 2021, a new way to simplify and proactively optimize your application infrastructure. My name is Eugene Kim from the AppDynamics Global Product Marketing team. And today, I'll be your host. I'll be joined by Steve Long, who's our corporate CTO for AppDynamics, who's going to talk about what he's hearing from customers, what he's heard from them last year, what's he hearing from this year, and what's happening with their digital transformation initiatives. Then we'll be joined by Sean McEwen, who's going to go deep into the new innovation of Cisco Intersight Workload Optimizer, connected and integrate with AppDynamics and the power of what we're delivering together, as well as show you a very cool demo of what it looks like in action there. So let's talk to Steve. Steve, I know you're always really busy. Thank you for joining us today. Now, you have a very unique perspective because not only are you our corporate CTO, but you used to actually be an AppDynamics customer. So can you tell us a little bit about what you do at AppDynamics and some of your background as a CTO as well?
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me. I'll talk a little bit about my history. I think I'll start not too long ago, but back a decade ago, I was the VP of operations for an entertainment and television company. And we had a lot of applications and some challenges. And that was when I first became a customer of AppDynamics. And I've always been a customer of Cisco, running technology operations for companies and running technology for companies. And then my second job where I really used Cisco as well as AppDynamics was when I became the chief information officer for a financial tech company with billions of dollars of cash and hundreds of millions of prepaid debit cards in circulation. So it was essential to have visibility into my applications. Time was money there, and it was a very needed item to have, which was APM. So I moved into Cisco about 3 years ago and became the corporate CTO of technology strategy, looking at M&A and what we could do to round our portfolio out. and how we could modify our stance to really help customers, like it helped me when I was a customer. And I routinely meet with customers on a regular basis, everything from Fortune 500 to smaller companies, talk them through where we are with our product and how Cisco has really invested in application performance, observability really across the board, and how digital transformation is affecting them has really helped us drive our product innovations at AppDynamics. So I work on corporate strategy and really helping customers understand where we're going and take that feedback into our product.
Yeah, Steve, so one of the questions with that unique customer perspective, you talked to hundreds of customers during the pandemic and what they're planning for this year. How has the pandemic changed their pace of digital transformation within this last year?
And I think at the highest level, the feedback early on was projects that were going to be taken to deploy and really put into production in their digital transformation strategies began to move into something more like months rather than multiple years of moving to that stance. And we're seeing about 2/3 of the technologists in these organizations now having to jump in and perform tasks that they may never have done before. And so with all of that, though, they've now not only got a new customer experience that they have to really deliver to their end customers, but the customer experience to their business users has become paramount. So it's really created, we've surveyed, and over 80% has responded and said that it's been an increased technology pressure to these organizations that they've really never experienced before to compress time, space, and money to really deliver their products now in a completely online experience.
Yeah, and with these new digital experiences that they had to deliver, how has their application stack had to evolve to really meet this pace of transformation?
Yeah, and the transformation, I think, has started and the acceleration has happened. But if you think about, three-tier architectures in the past, there's been a location shift, meaning it's now not only moving to the cloud and really these cloud services, multi-cloud, but the people have moved. So it's been a location shift of the people moving to online, the employees moving completely to online. There's no such thing as really an office right now. And that's been where we've also seen the complexities really move into place. So you take an application and maybe break it up into 100 or 1,000 microservices. Your bits are being tossed around, not on your own data center, but multiple cloud providers and potentially SaaS components. So really that stack has become exponentially more complex, and the app experience has now become the key thing to manage.
Yeah, so it sounds like with the application becoming distributed and the increased complexity of the stack, the underlying IT domains or the infrastructure domains as well become more complex, right, as it's running in different type of environments. So how much harder has it been for our customers to be able to maintain and ensure that application experience? And most importantly, what is the impact when these experiences aren't ideal for their customers?
Yeah, and the feedback from customers, and especially even in my own regard running operations, is that it's no longer to find a problem as a needle in the haystack. It's really a needle in a needle stack where you've exponentially added technology and cross communication. So that's why it's essential to have observed what's happening, where things are going, and how best to position your company, both in the infrastructure side as well as the application side. The negative impact of that is that any impact to that experience and in any facet that might be broken is potentially, these users will switch. They might wiggle their phone, hit delete on that application, and get something new or similar. So brand loyalty has really become, the customer experience is really dependent on that.
Yeah, so it's kind of a very hard challenge because the application is complex, the infrastructure is complex, and therefore ensuring that experience has become that much harder, and the business impact is pretty tremendous if you can't deliver that, especially for the brand and switching costs as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when, everyone knows AppDynamics as kind of being the leader, right, within the application and business transactions space, right? We've been a leader for years. But it sounds like where we are now is that it's got to go beyond just application business performance monitoring, right? You need to go down into the stack and have complete observability. And AppDynamics being part of Cisco, Cisco's a leader within the networking, security, and data center infrastructure space. Steve, what are we doing together with Cisco, and what is our vision for observability?
Yeah, and this is a great way to look at observability. We all talk about it as technologists, but if you really boil it down into three pillars and really say, if I want to look at everything, what does that really mean? We've broken it up into the concept of visibility as the left-hand pillar, insights, which is really what you want to know what's happening in your stack, as well as taking an action when you find something that needs to be corrected. So on the left-hand side of this particular slide, it's when I think of what we need to see, these are the pieces of the digital real estate in any company's technology that really are the targets to really bring that visibility up and give that full stack understanding to be able to feed metrics into what we like to sit as AppDynamics, which is really looking at the metrics that come in, time series, and making sense of that. So when something turns from green to yellow to red, that we can actually surface that and make sense of that. Because once you can do that and you can shrink the time to find, then the time to take action or fix, those are the two key words that as a CIO that resonated with me. If I could find problems faster and fix them faster, that was the key to my success, was really being able to understand it better was the goal. So on the right-hand side, the action is if something does happen, and AppDynamics can share that with you in the application perspective, then you can make an action such as maybe open up, just the simple fact of opening up an incident to the right team. It's game-changing versus having 75 people on a conference call. And then down from there, there's other actions once you understand the problem that you can actually move towards a fix in a better way.
Right. So let's zoom down into infrastructure and how applications and infrastructure teams usually work. Steve, from your experience at CT, what you hear from customers to be able to resolve and ensure application experiences.
Sure. So the key thing is that infrastructure teams are working in the infrastructure world, and it's gotten better. We've moved to more agile, and app teams are now working a little bit more with infrastructure teams. But if that communication isn't there, then independently a silo. But the infrastructure side has now grown. We talked about a little bit before exponentially, but it's really moved into not only one cloud provider, but multi-cloud providers. You still have all your legacy applications, right? So those have not gone away. And all the new modern architectures of microservices and containers, even stateless type of functions and ephemeral type of functions that are moving, it's just become even more complex for infrastructure teams to manage. So having that full stack observability for the infrastructure team is key, and then tying these two worlds together is a way to start to communicate more intelligently between groups of people that used to be siloed.
Yeah, so like from the day-to-day standpoint, Steve, what are the frustrations that the application and infrastructure teams are facing? Like, typically what would they passive-aggressively might put in a Slack channel together?
Sure. The first thing we always used to say was we'd always point at the network, and then the network would be weeded out, and then you really had everybody would hide into their tool. So unfortunately, what would end up happening, and I used to measure my team's success by giving them back their nights and weekends. So how do you do that? You don't start pointing fingers. You don't get 75 people on a war room call. You start to figure out ways that you can work together and understand, instead of backing into a corner and finger pointing and frankly getting mad at each other, to actually work with each other. And the game changer for me, and early on with AppD and a number of Cisco tools, was being able to have the ability for multiple teams to look at data in a set of tools that made sense, that they could all understand. AppDynamics was that game changer for me a long time ago, and it gave correlation to a number of points that we just saw in that last slide of what was happening and where it was happening, and not just pointing to the network or a database. So really looking to see if there was a dependency that we couldn't see before. And with all the complexity that's come in, now I would say it's almost humanly impossible to troubleshoot without the right tools in place. So that's kind of my take. It's moved from crazy war room situations with working with tools like we have and what we're going to talk about today, really giving a much better perspective to work with your peer teams and combine information to actually solve business problems. Because the last thing you want is your business teams to be impacted, because that's value to the company.
Yeah, no, that's great. So let's go back to the visibility, insight, and action framework that you brought up about the full stack observability. But now let's talk about specifically with the new innovations we're talking about with infrastructure optimization. What does that do for teams across these three paradigms?
Yeah, and ultimately, the infrastructure is the base lifeblood. I mean, the network is kind of the arteries and veins, but the infrastructure is really the basis point for applications to run. And with a solid foundation, you've got a great start. But once applications start to spin and use resources, it's a key area that you can see if CPU is going or memory is going, but to actually see that relationship between an application and the infrastructure, it's kind of like that chocolate and peanut butter. Once you can bring those two metrics together, if there is some issue with that, you can start to begin to look at that more intelligently. So really being able to connect the experience from your business metrics to your application metrics. Then if you do have a problem or you need to do something, to be able to start to automate functions by being able to see them. And then ultimately, you can't be putting up such a complex set of technology to look at to solve problems. You want to be able to make it very simple. Look at your control planes, make sure you can understand what's happening in them, and then ultimately to optimize. So those are the key actions that you want to take by looking at the application. And on the right-hand side, if I see that there is a region, say in one cloud provider that's not working well, and I can move it to another region, just by moving that application and having an understanding that the application is not working in that specific region, that's like gold. That's something that was a blind spot that most companies can't see. And being able to turn on resource scaling and cost optimization, and really being able to migrate easily between clouds or data centers, these are huge actions that can take a set of challenges that are very difficult and simplify them in the more meaningful ways to look at your challenges when you're having them. So all the business and application to taking an action, we can now marry those together in a strategy around the simplification of visibility, insights, and action. So for me, this is a really exciting time, and really looking at the workloads and what we can do at Cisco and our investments with our workload optimizer. It's a great time to be able to bring these worlds together.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for those insights. And I know you're a busy man, and we're lucky to have you part of AppDynamics. So up next, I'm going to invite Sean. Thanks a lot, Steve. All right, Sean, we just heard some great insights from Steve, and you're going to take us deeper into Cisco Intersight Workload Optimizer for AppDynamics. Sean, give us a little bit of background and tell us, what does a technology solution architect do at Cisco?
Yeah, thanks, Eugene. I really appreciate it. And Steve, thank you for the time. It has been a pretty good run here at Cisco for me. I joined about 10 years ago, right at the start of the offering of UCS, our Unified Computing System. And it was just really neat to be around and be a part of the growth of that offering in our data center portfolio. And to see its evolution up to and including now Intersight, Cisco Intersight, and most recently in the topic today, Intersight Workload Optimizer. So in that time, I spent a whole bunch of time talking to customers, presenting our offerings, but also working with our field teams and our business units to refine those offerings. And been privileged to be able to do so with a great team and to be able to work on such cool technology like we have here today.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Sean. So most of us know Intersight for managing UCS as well as HyperFlex infrastructure and storage systems. But Intersight's actually evolved in the last few years, right? And Workload Optimizer is a part of the platform. Can you share a little bit about that evolution? And for those that are familiar with Cisco Workload Optimizer, or CWOM, how has that evolved as well into the platform?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you see here, the kind of foundation of Intersight going back now, I think about 3 years, is one of an infrastructure management service. So essentially being able to take the control plane for managing Cisco UCS, our unified computing system, and our HyperFlex systems, take the control plane from them and move that up into the cloud as a service and deliver that wherever the infrastructure may reside, whichever, around the world, and do so in a scalable, agile, and really kind of open manner, open API, fast new development of new features and that sort of thing. That was the core foundational and is the core foundation of Intersight. However, it was never meant to be the end game. It was never meant to be the only trick in the in the quivers, or only arrow in the quiver, so to speak. Over those last 3 years, we have been evolving that platform, the Intersight platform, as a cloud operating platform rather than simply a management of servers in the cloud kind of thing. And to that end, you've seen very recently some additions to the service. We are building out our Intersight Cloud Orchestrator. We are adding and will be adding our Intersight Kubernetes service and virtualization services. And as of the end of last year, around November timeframe, we added the Intersight Workload Optimizer service. And that starts to bring the infrastructure capability, bring Intersight up from simply the infrastructure management capability arena and into that workload and cloud management world, and truly make it a cloud operating platform. In that same time, you mentioned CWOM. In that same time frame, that last 3 years, we have been selling and doing quite well with a product called Cisco Workload Optimization Manager, which is a standalone solution, software installed that customers manage to do workload optimization. In that time frame, we essentially took that same code or a variation of it, rather, and integrated that into Intersight. And now we are able to deliver that workload optimization service as a service through the cloud, through the power of Intersight, and be able to scale it and deploy it wherever, whenever a customer is running their infrastructure. So pretty excited about all that.
No, it's great. A lot of innovations coming with the new Intersight platform. So let's go specifically to Intersight Workload Optimizer, Sean. And what does it enable for, as we've heard, to simplify and solve the challenges that Steve's mentioned between these application and infrastructure teams?
Yeah, great question. So the way I think about Workload Optimizer is really essentially addressing what I would consider kind of the core problem in IT operations today, and that is to deliver performant applications at the lowest possible cost. If you think about what IT teams are charged with doing, it's that. No matter what the specific job is, it's all in service of making sure that end users get applications that perform well, and then making sure they do so with the least cost. And if you can manage somehow to do that, then you're doing a pretty good job. But in today's world, with microservices-based architectures, containers, VM sprawl, on-prem, public cloud, it's essentially impossible. I would argue it is beyond human scale to be able to deliver on that promise. And what typically happens is customers will over-provision in hopes that helps solve the performance problem. Often it doesn't, by the way, but they'll attempt to throw hardware at the problem, but it's clearly if they're doing that, they're not meeting that secondary goal of minimizing costs. And so that's what the software does. That's what this workload optimizer service does, is analyzes the customer's environment and ensures in real time that we're constantly delivering on that promise. And it's a bold promise, but it is a extremely important area for our customers.
No, it's some exciting innovation. And I think what's even more exciting is that we didn't just end there, right, Sean? We've now integrated AppDynamics into Intersight Workload Optimizer. So can you share what is the power of those now combined, right, with AppDynamics target?
Absolutely. And this is maybe what one of the things I'm most excited about with the overall solution. And just to boil it down, if you think kind of what does it take to deliver well-performing applications, right? Well, you gotta really hit it at two levels. You've got to make sure that the applications themselves are well written and well architected. And then you also have to make sure that they are getting the infrastructure resources they need when they need them in real time. And that is, that's a 1-2 punch that's really hard to deliver. But that's exactly what we are able to do with the integration between AppDynamics and Intersight Workload Optimizer. AppDynamics, of course, and as Steve said, and as we started with, does such a wonderful job at that first level, right, of making sure that your applications are written and architected well. It knows way more about apps than I ever will. Right? It can go way down into the depths of the code and find that part of the query against a database that's misperforming or what have you. But as well as it can work, as good as it is at its job, it needs some help. There's that second piece of the puzzle, and that's where Intersight Workload Optimizer comes into play. We've got to also make sure that those applications are getting the right infrastructure resources they need at the right time, but not more than they need, right? Not overdoing it. And so that's what Workload Optimizer does, and it does it by talking to and ingesting information from AppD, so that basically both AppD and Workload Optimizer are working off the same sheet of music, right? And this is unique in the industry. This is an area where Cisco, this is one of the great things about working at Cisco is you get to see these kinds of disparate solutions that other vendors have to kind of work around come together and integrate directly. So we're working off the same data set. We're working off the same view of the application. So Workload Optimizer, it understands the logical business application, and its understanding of the logical business application comes directly from the knowledge it gets from AppD. And that's just a very powerful capability.
Yeah, so truly between the applications and infrastructure teams, they can now have kind of a common correlated view for these different problems. And with that common view, be able to quickly resolve any type of performance issues that's related to the infrastructure cloud.
Absolutely. And Steve mentioned earlier, I'm going to forget his phrasing, but it was basically like detect and fix, I think it was. And I would add to that prevent, right? Like if we can be analyzing the infrastructure in real time, we can be providing it what it needs before you get into trouble, right? And that's a huge piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, no, definitely going from reactive to becoming more proactive by having that visibility across the application performance as well as across the infrastructure stack as well.
Absolutely.
All right. Yeah, so, the engineer in me wants to go deeper. So, Sean, can you give us a techie deep dive of what exactly is happening with AppDynamics and Intersight Workload Optimizer behind the scenes?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and again, I'm going to borrow some of Steve's phrasing, which I really like. It's that kind of chocolate and peanut butter analogy, right? Both of those things are great on their own, right? Who doesn't love chocolate? Who doesn't love peanut butter? But then when you combine them, you get something pretty special as well. So if you think about just like maybe the chocolate, if you, I don't know, pick your analogy here. With just our visibility, Workload Optimizer's visibility into your hypervisor infrastructure, right? Nothing to do with AppD. We can get some pretty rich information, right? We can get some detail from vCenter or Hyper-V or your AWS or Azure environment. We about the thing that contains the application, whether that's a VM or a container, what have you. So we can understand its consumption of memory and CPU and storage and so forth. But you end up hitting a wall there. There is an opaqueness to that understanding of the world when you can't see past the black box of the hypervisor or the container, and that's where AppD comes into play. So when we have the telemetry that AppD provides us, being ingested into Workload Optimizer, we can break past that black box. We can see into the container or the VM. We can see specific, for example, JVM heap consumption utilization. We know whether it's a database running inside the VM or a web middle tier or some Java application or whatever the case may be. And we even can understand the detail of application response time or individual transaction performance, and whether that performance is maybe suffering from an application issue or suffering from an infrastructure resourcing issue.
All right.
And that's key, right?
No, it's great. It's great. I mean, it's like you have here, you're making your infrastructure more application aware, right? It could proactively understand and understand the application performance and the context of the infrastructure resources there. So tell us about the trade-offs then, Sean, that Intersight Workload Optimizer is making in order to keep the application optimized.
Yeah, so with that understanding, with that ability to logically understand the application from AppD, we can marry application information with infrastructure understanding as well. So yes, we talk to AppD and we get a really rich source of data from it, but we also talk to storage and network and hypervisors and public cloud APIs and so forth. And we do all this, by the way, agentless. All right, we're just making API calls to these targets, what we call them, or targets. And we ingest metrics from all of these, basically anything we can get our hands on that's relevant to making a decision, and analyze that information in real time and make decisions. That's the ultimate goal. It's not simply to provide some visibility, which is great. It's not simply to provide insight, which is also great. Action is the ultimate goal. We want to be able to, and we do, provide actions, the right actions to take with the infrastructure to assure performance and minimize cost along the way. And we do that looking, like I said, not just at something basic like CPU utilization or memory utilization, but at swapping and ballooning, at ready queue, wait states, storage IOPS, network bandwidth. I think there's 50, 60, I don't even remember how many different metrics get analyzed in real time constantly to make these decisions.
Yeah, it's doing this in both a proactive and, if there is an issue, help you quickly have an action to resolve that issue as well, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Sean, one thing I'm curious about, like, is it possible for teams to physically do this? Like, can they have a team of analysts that are constantly looking at CPU, memory, storage, and network, and actually humanly possibly do this performance?
Yeah, they can try. Yeah. The current model, I mean, it's a fair question. The current model is essentially one where customers attempt to do this, but they do so essentially by setting up alerts. So they set up thresholds for things that are proxies for performance, right? They'll look at something like CPU utilization, and they'll create an alert for that utilization when it crosses a predetermined threshold. And that threshold is usually something backed way off of 100%, so that they have some time, first of all, to react to the alert and decide whether it's even something to pay attention to. Ask your cousin, or ask any of your friends out there. Most of the time, if you say, okay, how many alerts do you ignore on a daily basis?
Right.
Your IT team, the answer is going to be north of 80%. Right? Most alerts get ignored because they're not actionable, because there's just they're not telling you that there's something real there, or if they are, it's too hard to divine. It's too hard to determine what it is. So customers set these alerts, they flood themselves with pages, and then they rely on humans to try to first determine whether that alert is worth paying attention to. And if they decide it is worth paying attention to, what to do about it? What's the right decision? And that in a complex environment with hundreds, thousands of workloads, dozens, hundreds, thousands of servers, what is the right decision? Do you move the problematic VM to a different host, or do you move VMs that are not problematic to free up resources for the one that is having trouble? Do you provide more resources? Do you take them away? Do you scale out the container pod or not? What's the right decision?
Right.
It's beyond human scale.
Yeah. So, Sean, I mean, at this point, this is the point that I've been looking forward to, is let's see a demo. Let's see this in action of the power of AppDynamics, Intersight Workload Optimizer working together. So can you share us a little bit about what we're going to see in this upcoming demo here?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm with you. Let's talk and more doing, right? Yeah. So in the demo today, we're going to take a look at the overall Intersight front end, the GUI, right? The login into the web servers. We'll get a look at how we add targets. So the easy way of basically adding credentials so that the software can reach out and talk to AppD or other third-party targets. And then how we stitch together our logical understanding of the infrastructure and the applications in that infrastructure and all the relationships therein, what we call the supply chain. And then we'll take a look at some specific actions that in the demo environment the software is recommending that we take in furtherance of that overall goal, maximizing, making sure the application is performing well and minimizing cost along the way. So with that, why don't we just jump right in? Let's do it. So as you can see, here we are logged into Intersight, and this is intersight.com. This is live. And what you'll see when you log in, if you've ever been into Intersight before, is the usual default dashboard screen where you can see a number of different widgets showing statistics and data that are relevant if you're managing UCS servers or Hyperflex arrays. You can find the usual inventory and all the rich information that is typically available within Intersight for your Cisco data center environment. But in addition to all of that goodness, we've got a new tab over here, the Optimize tab, and that is for Intersight Workload Optimizer. And before we jump into that tab, I just want to show quickly how we add new targets. Targets are sources of information for Workload Optimizer to draw from, to talk to, and ingest telemetry and critical information about the data center environment from. And adding a target is a really simple process. We just come into the target section here. We click on Claim New Target. And there you can see a number of different choices available for adding target information. And so, for example, we can add AppDynamics with a really simple checkbox and a wizard approach. Basically add username, password, and location for your AppD environment, and hit claim. And once done, we then have AppD added as a target, and Workload Optimizer can talk to AppD and learn from AppD basically everything it needs to know about the application environment. And it can use that deep source of telemetry, deep source of metadata, of information about the application in order to make better decisions. And so certainly AppD is a critical piece of the puzzle here, but as you can see, we've got a number of other available targets, including storage and hypervisor and so forth. And it's basically the same process for all of those to go ahead and add them. And once you do, we then have the ability to just reach out through API calls, no agents here, and talk to those targets and ingest their data and start analyzing them. And that's what you see here in the Optimize tab. The very first thing the software does after pulling in that data is to stitch together what we call the supply chain here. And the supply chain is a logical representation over here on the left of all of the entities in the data center that we've learned about through those conversations, those API calls to the targets. And this gets stitched together automatically. There's no human intervention required here after providing your credentials. And it shows both public and private cloud all in one image here. You can filter on one or the other as you see fit, narrow it down to either just on-prem or just public cloud accordingly. And it's clickable. So if we want to narrow in our scope, here we're seeing basically everything from an application view. But if we want to narrow in our scope to one particular application, and this is an application as defined in AppD, then we can do that. And you can see the supply chain resets. And now we're only seeing the resources and the dependencies for that one application, in this case, AD Financial Lite ACI. That's a mouthful, but point being, we're only now looking at the specific dependencies of that logical business application. And this source of this data here about applications and transactions, that's coming directly from AppD. And we're not just getting logical dependencies from AppD, showing what the application depends on, what virtual machines it's running on, and storage and so forth, and that being stitched automatically. But we're also getting information about individual business transactions. You can see where we can see in Workload Optimizer here, we can see statistics about application response time. We can see transaction throughput. We can see the health of individual business transactions within that application, and we can see that because of the information that AppD provides us. So we're also able to then do a health assessment in real time of those applications and their transactions, and we can see what specific actions are being recommended right now to improve the status of that application and the underlying environment. So, for example, we see here a number of opportunities for efficiency. We've got a lot of vMotions being recommended, which will allow us, if we execute them, and we can execute them, by the way, automatically just by checking a box and hitting apply. It'll make that call out to vCenter to do that. But if we execute those transactions, those vMotions, we can then improve our efficiency by basically decommissioning, suspending one host in particular. So basically, we're over-provisioned on hardware here, and we have an opportunity to reclaim some of that. But we're also over-provisioned at a logical level. If we exit out of here and take a peek specifically at our scaling actions, you can see that we've got a number of opportunities here for reclaiming resources safely. And this is the key. Not only are we able to safely recommend resizing down of particular virtual machines that are part of this business application, but because of the telemetry that we get from AppD, because we can see past the black box of the hypervisor, and we can actually see inside a given virtual machine or container and know what's happening in there, we can make recommendations at a JVM level. So here you see us recommending to resize down the heap within a particular VM. And we know that that is safe to do because of the data we get from AppD. So you can see a number of different opportunities here for matching infrastructure resources to application needs, and doing so efficiently, safely, and essentially with the same sheet of music, if you will, the same view of the logical view of the application that you would have coming from AppD, because we're working off the same set of data. And that's that. Yeah. So end of the demo, and I'm going to hand it back to Eugene here.
Sean, thank you so much for that great demo. And Steve, thank you again for joining us on those great customer insights. So everyone, I hope you can see the power of Cisco Intersight Workload Optimizer for AppDynamics for your operations in 2020. Really giving you that ability to do performance control and optimization for your applications, making sure that they get continuously resourced from their infrastructure, whether it's on-prem, in a hybrid, or in a cloud-native type environment. And for those of you that are going through cloud migrations, what better way to ensure the performance of your applications that they're being resourced, whether it be before, during, or after cloud migration of your entire application, or even tiers of your application. And cost is becoming one of the biggest issues, especially in the cloud. And the power of what Intersight and AppDynamics is doing is providing you that ability to optimize your cloud costs, right? Not over provisioning within the cloud, and maintaining your performance and your customer experience while minimizing your cloud cost resources there. So as we wrap up, I want to invite you to request a trial for Intersight Workload Optimizer for AppDynamics. If you click on the link in the resources box within On24, you'll be able to request a trial to see what this looks like for your operations. And also join us for AppDynamics Transform 2021 from February 23rd to 26th. We're going to have a great lineup, some exciting new innovations in the observability space. And with that, I want to wish you a very safe and wonderful 2021. Talk to you soon. Thank you.